Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Batter, a podcast about how brands, business owners, and entrepreneurs rise. I'm your host, Jill Miller of Vera Creative, a small marketing firm in the Chicagoland area, where I'm also a part-time instructor of an advertising course at St. Xavier University. Join me as I hang out and talk to people who know all about the ingredients to success and the recipes for disaster. Hey everybody, I'm here with Dr. and author Lona Cook of Cook Chiropractic Center. Welcome to the show, Lona.
Thanks for having me, Jill. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you, just to get your story and to hear your journey. I know that you own, is it 2 chiropractic centers?
Yeah, so at one point I had 3, and we just sold it was our second that we opened. I sold it to my partner. That one was a little further away from where I'm currently living. And so we have 2 brick and mortars, and then we have one that actually operates within the school district. So we have 3 businesses, but 2 that are actually like you can walk in and become a new patient in the actual clinics. So, yep.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've never actually heard of a chiropractic center operating within the school district, so we'll have to dive into that a little bit later. But let's back up and give me kind of the Cliff Notes version of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll give you the real short story. So in 2010, well, I should probably start. In 2009 is when I graduated chiropractic school. And kind of had my awakening, if you will, to learning that life could be lived differently. And so I thought I was going to move out to San Diego. I had a job lined out there. I was set to do my last internship out there. And it was like the universe was giving me major wake-up signs to not go that direction. And I wasn't taking them. So, of course, it had to get rockier. And then my last day before I was set to move out in the morning with my mom, I was sitting in the clinic that I worked in, and the doctor I worked for at the time, she said to me, and she turned around in her chair, and she was from the East Coast, so she was very direct. And she was like, Lona, when are you going to wake the hell up? You're not supposed to go. And I just remember thinking, she's right, and I don't know what to do about it. So I had never really thought about backing down on things before. It felt really foreign to me and like failure. So once I gave myself permission the next day to do that, which just felt, again, so weird, it was like the whole world sort of opened up because I really didn't have a plan. And what ended up happening is I started looking around our hometown and figuring out if that was a possibility. So I ended up writing 2 business plans, one for Chippewa Falls and one for Hudson, Wisconsin, which is western Wisconsin. And that was actually where we ended up opening 2 locations. So at the time, I had no idea that I would open more than one practice. I didn't really know what to expect, but things just started to roll. And so the first practice opened and grew it from the ground up, and then was crazy enough to think I could do it again, and quickly found out I needed to get some really great people on my team with me to do some of these things. So I learned how to lead and expand and just wear the different hats that you wear in entrepreneurial world, as well as, developing and learning about healing and natural health. So that's kind of my evolution in 10 years has been from that point on, of just realizing you can do things differently than you think you're going to do them, and it's okay. And then really watching to see what unfolds and what doesn't, and kind of letting that guide me as I'm taking action.
That story speaks to me because I had a very similar experience when I left Chippewa, but I ignored all the signs and ignored all the advice and went anyways. And I often wonder what was awaiting, and I often wish for the maturity that I had now back then. And I absolutely commend you for giving yourself that permission to fail, or to I don't think it was a failure at all. But you said no to something that you kind of had your heart set on. Yeah, at the time.
It felt like I was backing down, and that felt weird. Yeah. Right,
yeah. So if you don't mind my asking, how old were you when you opened your practice?
25.
So 25, that's
young.
So young. Yes. So you become a business owner at 25. Talk a little bit about what like what kind of financials did you have in place to be able to do that? Did you have to do like a business loan, or had you saved?
Yeah. So, this is something I talk to a lot of students about because I do a lot of teaching in the chiropractic schools for younger chiropractors. But certainly having, good credit and the foresight to know that you're not real lendable for a bank if you have nothing saved yourself was good wisdom that was passed on to me from my dad. I was blessed I grew up on a Christmas tree farm, so I joke that my dad was like a slave driver sort of, but he really wasn't. It was just like from age 7 on, I think I had like a little Mead notebook, and if I went outside and like fertilized the trees, then I had to write down how many hours, and like I'd get paid $2 an hour or something like that. So I worked, it's a true story. I worked from, undergrad and grad school and had money saved, not a ton, but enough that when I approached the bank with my business plan, I thought he was picking it apart because he asked me a million questions, and I was like, oh, God, he's not going to give me this money or lend me this money. But he said afterwards, after I answered his questions, he's like, well, congratulations. We don't generally loan to this type of business. However, you've answered the questions I wanted. I see that you have skin in the game. Like, we will help you. And so, again, it was kind of like this awakening truly of that things, you still have to take action, but it was like, I felt like for the first time I wasn't fighting an uphill battle with certain things, because I had kind of given myself, again, that permission to pause first and realize like, I can see what's happening and what's not happening. And so even when it came to like being 25 and trying to figure out like renting space and doing a build out and all that stuff, I had no idea really what I was doing, which was a blessing and a curse. But it was like the right people would show up or I'd get the right answers somehow, and I just kept taking steps forward. So I remember thinking like, I can't wait till I turn 30 so I don't have to feel so ashamed to tell people what my age is when they come into the practice. And then it's funny how that flips, where you're like, no, it's fine. I'd be happy to like feel like I'm even younger right now, But yeah, it was a learning curve. And my first assistant was like twice my age, which was a real blessing because I feel like it didn't look like there was only 2 young people running the practice then. It was, me and her, and we did it together. So
in a lot of my other podcasts, we talk about ingredients to success and recipes for disaster, and there's been themes for these ingredients that make a successful business a successful business owner, and one of the themes is mentors, and it sounds like you probably had some mentors along the way.
Oh, yes, I've had great mentors. I think it was I had a great chiropractor growing up that she actually said to me when I was partway through school, and kind of pre-framed what ended up happening to me. I went home and I had lunch with her or something. I wanted her to tell me like where to move to, what was going to be the perfect location for me to go and be successful in chiropractic. And she would just kind of like gave me this, at the time I thought it was kind of like an airy-fairy answer where she was like, well, you just need to pay attention. And like when life is flowing, you're probably in the right place. And when it's rocky, it's time to make a change. And at the time I was like, but I want you to just say like, go to New York or go to New Jersey. And she definitely didn't offer that. And so when I found myself in that rocky spot and whatnot, and then did make a change and things started to flow, then I got a mentor at the end of my first year who really schooled me in financials, in entrepreneurship, in systems, and learning, because I felt like the first year we grew fast and it was like I had a house of cards. I didn't know what I was doing. I, just cared about people but didn't really realize how to run a business. And so once I got some structure in place and realized like to look at money differently, where it's just an exchange and, you can create it flowing for you or you can make it negative if you choose to look at it that way, So he really helped me get my mind straight and start to see the potential of all these doors I was opening. And that was huge. And he's been a huge catalyst in many aspects of my life just because of his desire to look at things a little differently and then teach other people how to look at things differently.
That's awesome. Who is this mystery man, and is he for hire?
Yeah, his name is Tori Robeson. He predominantly works with chiropractors. He's like kind of like a, what's the word I want to say, like a drill sergeant. He has a background in the military, but I needed someone like that. I needed someone who was like, I remember, something happened and I was like second guessing myself, and I called him and he was like, yeah, so I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. He's like, yeah, Lona, like not everyone's gonna like you. That if you weren't reaching people's feathers won't get ruffled. And I was like, okay, all right, good. I'm glad that you just were my spine for me. Thank you. And sometimes you need that.
Yeah. So he sounds like he was somebody that in your industry, a mentor from your industry. Yeah. He had kind of been there and done that, and maybe guided other chiropractors to success as well.
Yes, definitely.
That's great. So you said you were growing really fast in the first year. Looking back, what do you attribute that fast growth to? Because I think there's a lot of business owners that, and I've mentioned this in several other podcasts as well, but they just kind of assume that whatever they do, business is just always going to be flowing and it's going to be simple and they're not going to have to sell or retain or, and that's kind of like a myth. Then you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs like, oh, geez, I thought I was going to be a lot busier than I am. Your story is different. So tell me what you think that was a result of.
I think some of it was like the ability at your young age to put blinders on. Like I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. I had a linear focus, and it was like I was going to grow this practice. I remember my dad, who has always been very helpful, an entrepreneur himself, saying to me, like, this is going to be hard, and kind of like trying to, poke a pin into my balloon. Not to be rude, I think it was just to try and keep me grounded. And I remember telling him at one point, I was like, that's your reality, that's not mine. And just like standing up for myself, because if my mindset was so like there wasn't another option, this was the option. So I think for some people, they have so many doubts that that's part of why their energy never gets going in the first place. Also, because I didn't have a whole lot of other things calling my attention, I could be selfish and just focus on it. And so I just took a massive amount of energy and action that first year. Now, in hindsight, one of the things I see is that, like, what is unsustainable with that is that there's seasons in everything. And learning, like, how to kind of navigate, like, I'm in a growth season, and so it's going to feel crazy and fast, and there's lots of good production happening, or I'm in a winter or a fall, and it's like, well, our numbers aren't increasing, they're actually decreasing right now. However, I'm learning some valuable lessons, or I'm getting my team straightened out, or whatever else comes with these pauses that we have. That in the beginning we have no, like, I guess we have no textbook of like having any sort of like history of understanding that, and so it's like crash course in like, oh, maybe I think I can grow like this every single year that I'm open. Just kidding,
So yeah, businesses that ebb and flow. And what do you think, what are some of the constants that you've done in terms of your marketing to maintain a good flow?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talk about marketing from kind of three different facets in our world of healthcare and specifically holistic healthcare. Is, we've got external, which is everything you can think of that's reaching out into the community. And certainly in the beginning, that was a huge part of what I was doing, was just trying to be involved in so many things and show up in so many places, not even necessarily to talk about my business, but just to be a face in the community that was like always present. And then as we started to have some influx in, that external marketing actually, I don't want to say it took a back seat, but it ended up being one of the things that maybe wasn't quite as orchestrated as it had been the first couple of years. And then internal marketing and obviously our online marketing became more important to us. So internal, a lot of it has to do for us is about like really trying to be specific about what we're educating about in the office and having like our branding internally really line up with that. So we're a wellness-based office, and so I don't want my messages to be not in alignment with that, so that people really are attracted in and get what they think they're attracted in for. And that helps internal referrals then too. So a lot of it was just like opening up different avenues where maybe someone who's come in for a short period of time and really is loving their care sends in their family members, or you have, what do they say, like the 80-20, like 20% of your people refer and 80% of your clients. You have your like raving fans who they're going to send everyone they know.
And keep those guys happy.
Yeah, exactly. Really trying to like take care of the people who are coming in, because so much can be done just by making sure that you're keeping people that want to be there and keeping them happy, and then as well as they're like your eyes and ears out into the community to bring other people in.
Yeah, so that's very well said. The 80-20 rule, it applies to so many things in marketing and business and probably life. But I definitely love that you bring that up, just because I'm always telling clients the exact same thing. Like the top, like your top revenue only comes from 20% of your customers or your business typically. So you can look at it from a revenue point of view as well. But the message that you give to those people is what's going to make them want to refer. The experience that you give, the 20%, is what's going to bring in the other 80%.
Yep, definitely.
And so it's just, and so talk to me a little bit about the branding experience, kind of like the experience that a patient has when they come in the door, the branding that you've done, if that makes sense, to go into their experience.
Yeah. So I think initially it was like I just wanted to think about what I would want as like a patient seeking out chiropractic. And again, I said like my naivety in the beginning was maybe the blessing on certain levels too. Like, I grew up in a family who utilized chiropractic, so I thought everyone utilized chiropractic, just like dentistry. So I didn't really realize that, I don't know, that bubble had never burst for me, that like, oh, there's a lot of people who don't know what it is or don't utilize it. And so I just had this assumption again that like if I was in integrity and really trying to like help people, then they would want my help, especially if they've already like crossed in through our doors. And so when I thought about like how I wanted things to work in the office as far as like the procedures and the systems that we use, and I really just asked myself over and over and over again, like, what would I want? Because I really feel that we make things generally too complex as well as not congruent. In business, we might want one thing for ourselves, but somehow we've crafted a business that does not operate that way. And that's like, for me, a recipe for disaster, because the incongruencies just lead to so many challenges. So that was something I know the first 5 years that I thought about a lot, was like, okay, each month, but probably every year especially, you kind of do a recap where you're like, what do I know now that I didn't know, a year ago or 6 months ago? And how does that make me look at, how I process or work with a new patient, or how, we allow people to be returning customers for years, like, is there things I should be doing better? Is there things I should be doing differently? And what would I want? And keep going back to that question kind of like, what would me as a patient, or if I was taking care of a family member or a loved one, what would I want for them if they went somewhere else? And trying to use that to help figure out what that would look like for me. And I think that's a lot of how my brand originated, was just, you are who you are. And so your brand, for most of us as entrepreneurs, especially small businesses, is going to be an offshoot directly of the energy you carry. So to have it created in a way that isn't authentic to you probably doesn't work. So like when you step foot in the office, like I realize I'm in a bubble at this point. I realize our offices are giant bubbles of like maybe what the average other places are not, and I'm okay with that. And I think I forget that sometimes when people come from, like I had a girlfriend who they own a dentist office, and she came and she's like, you do realize it's different in here. And I was like, oh, maybe, I guess. And so now I think it's just continued to evolve, where I realize like it doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It doesn't have to be sterile because it's medical. It can be this place that our branding has really been about, like talking about people with what's right with your body, not everything that's wrong with your body. Let's work with what's right. Let's listen to your body. Let's listen to all these things that we all have somehow early on in our life generally forgotten that we're intelligent beings and our world is an intelligent universe, and there's so many messages coming to us. And I think from a healthcare perspective, especially, we've done a disservice to the patient by teaching them that they need to rely on people outside of themselves so much, when really it's like their answers are within. So that is then seen in how we use languaging and communication, and whether it's what we're saying to the patient or what our colors say when they walk in. Like, I want it to be about life, not about the opposite.
Yeah, wow, so many things come out of this. But the most recent thing that you said, even just down to the colors, I love that you put thought into that, because there is psychology behind colors. And I think that was like one of my first blog posts 10 years ago when I opened my business, was just, as you think about branding and your logos, because there's some bad logos out there, and there's some bad websites out there that I'm like, talk about a recipe for disaster. Nobody's going to connect with that. And or it's just like, I don't know, hot pink with a heavily male target.
Yeah.
Something like just like off the mark. So you're so right about that. But I don't know, I picture you as somebody that journals, that reflects, that's very introspective, that needs growth in order to maybe feel successful. Is that true? Would you say that about yourself,
totally.
Your personality?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But I do think that you're right. I think if you're not sitting down at the end of the year or the end of the quarter or a sales cycle, depending on your industry, and you're not asking these questions, you're missing huge opportunities for growth. And I don't know if it's people's resistance or fear to change, where they put a system and process in place and they don't want to change it because they get attached to it or comfortable with it. I'm not sure what it is. Do you have any insight on that?
I think you hit I've hit a lot of them. I'm in a mastermind right now that's all people who are stepping into more CEO roles within their practices, instead of necessarily being the one wearing lots of different hats right now. And it's fascinating to listen. It's all men that I'm with, but it's interesting to listen to, which I think men and women run things differently to some extent. Not to like get super genderized in this, but
no, I hear you.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I just thought about today based on our conversation we had earlier in this call was just kind of like, for some people change becomes so natural, almost like you realize everything is changing all the time, and you can move with it more fluidly. And for other people with maybe a slightly slower pace, or for whatever reason in childhood or whatever, change has represented something unwanted, and so you shy away from it to the extent of sabotaging, yourself sometimes. And that's what I think for me is I realized, like, as someone who used to change almost too fast, like I'm too like, oh, I don't like that, I'm going to move in the opposite direction. For me, like paying attention and journaling and really trying to understand like my role in things has allowed me to realize when it is time to make change. And by no means do I think I've got this down yet, but I can see how it kind of works as far as like when our business is really thriving, it's usually because we've made some good tweaks, or, like things that had caused stress before, we figured out how to like navigate that differently because we're, willing to make a slight tweak to something, sometimes a really big tweak to something. And I think I'm not afraid to try it. And so a lot of times with my team, that's one thing that I'm always trying to reiterate is like what's happening today is not going to happen. It's not going to be like this. And we're all in this learning curve right now. We're like, you're on plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, just trying to navigate like life right now because so much is changing in our world. So I think that's one of the things that really holds people back, is just thinking that because you've always done it a certain way, it's got to stay that way, or because a certain person's always worked with you, they've got to stay in that same role instead of shaking things up. Because a lot of times when you shake it up, you're going to get new ideas. either it's going to be like, oh, this isn't working, or, oh, it could be done differently. I just never even thought about it that way until you had this shake-up that allowed you to see it, you know?
Yeah. I was in a 2-hour webinar today, conference call basically, and somebody said, you know, we have to be open to new ideas, and it doesn't matter where those ideas come from. And I thought that that was a really good point. And another thing I wanted to say, too, is aside from the fear, I think it's money. I think it's related to money because people invest a lot of time and money and energy into one thing, and they don't want to give it up or change, because then that would mean they wasted their money or they have to spend, you know, more money. And I know that that is a hesitation for just, I mean, a lot of the people that I work with is there's always some type of money issue and fear about putting in the money without knowing if they're going to get the return. What are some of the things, what are some of the ways that you've been strategic with how you spend your marketing budget, you know, in the past couple of years now that you're more established?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I am more apt to spend more money, whether that's buying, like we just did a raffle in our area to try and promote people just supporting local businesses again, as we all are coming out of this. And so, you know, we'll buy some like Yeti prizes or something fun like that. So I would rather put more money into my internal marketing than almost anywhere at this point, to really just keep things fun, keep them lively, keep people paying attention to what we're doing that already know who we are in the community. So that for me has been, I think, a smart move. I think sometimes I err on the side of not spending enough in just external or online things that I haven't maybe in the past seen a huge like direct turnaround on, but that is also because I'm not constantly doing it. Whereas the internal, I feel comfortable with because I always seem to feel like I can see a direct benefit right away. And I think that's easier to measure too. And that's the hard thing with external or online, you know, like, what do they say? People need to see your things like 11 times before. Yeah. Right, exactly. So it's like, how do you ever really know? It's like, I don't think any marketing that you do is ever really totally bad as long as people were exposed to like an authentic brand of you, because it's planting a seed, you know, and that seed may not harvest for 8 years, and that's okay. And that's another thing that I think early on you just don't have the ability to see that. That can really limit you too, because you feel like, oh, I'm pushing this out and nothing's happening. It's like, right, because you need to just let them grow for a while, you know?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I talked with this podcast guest, but you're so right. A lot of the money you bring in goes back into the business, and I don't think a lot of people who start out or a lot of early on entrepreneurs realize just how much money they're going to have to put back into the business. And just in thinking with past clients that I've worked with, you're right. The ones that are most reluctant to do that are the ones that are struggling. And they're kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're cheap. And you just can't always be, you can't always be cheap. And I'm thinking forward as well to another guest that I hope to have on this show, and you know her as well. She's another Chippewa Falls business owner, but Allison Short. And I can tell you for a fact, that's where the majority of her budget goes. It goes back into the business, new equipment, you know, just like I joke that I would eat off of her gym floor because I know how meticulous she is about cleaning, right? And all that takes time and energy and money, but it shapes the experience and it shapes the brand, and it's super important. And I think that that's one thing people, if you're taking notes or whatever, you want to remember, but write it down. This has come up again in speaking with a business owner, and that, you're going to have to put money back into your business. Great. That's a really great point. So let's jump ahead.
That's another place that I think you can't go wrong, is like developing together those that you work with and pouring money back in to keep developing them.
I think no matter what you do in life, investing in people is probably very wise, whether they're investing in the people of your family, in the people of your community, in the people as in your patients, your coworkers. Yeah, I think that's like a whole other podcast, but like as a society, we need to kind of invest more in people than ourselves or money or time or whatever it is of these things that distract us from growth. So you have sold a practice. Tell me a little bit about what that process was like.
Yeah, it felt weird a little bit because it's like you're letting a baby go, but it also felt really successful because it meant our contract worked. So when I started the second practice, I started it originally thinking that I would move into that practice because I was living in Hudson, which is about an hour away from Chippewa Falls, our first practice, and quickly realized like running two practices was not the same as just one. And so I, again, like people kind of get attracted in as you realize what you need. And so at the time then I was working still 3 days a week in Chippewa and working like nights and weird hours in Hudson, and just, it was unsustainable. So I met Dr. Shelby Henriksen right around that time, and it just was like, the shoe fit, and we were a good match to talk about future partnerships. So she ended up buying into that practice, which made her a half partner in it. And so in our original contract, it just said after 5 years, then she would have the opportunity to buy me out. And we decided in the fall that we were going to do that because it was coming on the 5 years. And so we still get together and do some training, and it's been kind of like this evolution that's like, okay, are we really separating? Are we not separating? Like, what's happening? But the actual, like, sell date was December 31st last year, and it felt really good, actually. I was like, oh, yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't know if I have any desire to open, like, a lot more practices. I've kind of pushed pause on that right now. I'm pregnant, and, there's other things happening in my life. But I love that contract did exactly what we wanted it to do, which was get this practice started, have it be a like successful, lucrative venture for both of us, and now it can take flight with her steering it whatever direction she chooses to go. Now, it takes the reins off of her then too.
Well, congratulations on your pregnancy, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
Always a blessing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because it seems like another theme that has come up is just having a long-term vision when you're in business. We talked about this. Growth isn't always fast. It's not always quick. Revenue isn't always pouring in. So you have to be in it for the long game. You have to have a marketing strategy that can withstand time. And even when you sell a business, you've kind of got to have, well, in your case, you had a long game plan. It was a 5-year plan. It was a 5-year process of you transitioning out of that practice. So where does becoming an author fit into all of this?
Well, yeah, okay, you hit the nail on the head. It's like I'm like a doer. I'm a producer. I like new things. So yeah, it's like if I don't have something I'm like kind of like excited, need to figure out, then I probably could create bad things to have to figure out, meaning like problems that don't need to be problems. So the book is for me, like, my undergrad was in creative writing. I knew I was going to go into chiropractic school, but I just really liked writing. So I did my undergrad in creative writing, and then all my extra classes were science. And so after finishing chiropractic school, I realized one thing that I felt was really lacking was someone giving like a firsthand account of opening a practice and what they did and how did they get people in the doors and how did they pay off loans and all that stuff. So I just literally put together like a firsthand account of what I did the first couple of years. And that book really opened a ton of doors for me. I had no idea. When I put it together, I didn't even know if I was going to ever like put it into a book format, but I self-published it, and that was in 2013. And then like very quickly I got to start speaking and doing some different things within our like profession. And then that led me to getting exposed to lots of cool teachers of many different philosophies. And so I've written a few books like as co-authors now, and I just like writing. So I actually just finished and sent off to, I'm hiring someone to help me self-publish this time, my first book that's really not meant for the chiropractic profession. And so I'm pretty excited that hopefully will be done before the end of the year. And it's just like a good outlet for me to take some of this creative energy I have, and some of these like learning curves I've been in and share them essentially.
So who's the target for this third book?
This is going to be, I would assume, women, just because that seems to naturally kind of drawn to how I go about teaching kind of life evolution, if that makes sense. So it's probably going to be more heavily entrepreneurial, but I think all women who are kind of in that age 20 to 40, 45-ish range, I don't know, who are like having these kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, you know, where you're like in these almost like holy shit moments of like something is got to change here and I can't figure it out quite yet, but I'm paying attention now more than I've ever paid attention. And to me, that's like the most fun to witness people go through some of this, because I don't always know, but I always feel like things happen for a reason, and helping people navigate, trying to figure out their own story of how, you know, they can use it to make their life better or get more in line with their purpose is something I really like. And it fits in nicely with like holistic healing. You can hear my dog probably breathing heavily in the background. Because I just think your health is an offshoot of all that. And so what I've learned in holistic health has really led me into this kind of, I don't know, just more metaphysical teaching of looking at energy and how it's working for us, whether that's in our business, in our personal life, finances. I mean, you can apply it to really anything. So that's where I've taken some of this and made it a more of a, anyone could read this and hopefully laugh a little about some of my crazy stories I share, because I'm still writing it like we're having a conversation, but it's meant to help people pay attention on a deeper level.
Oh, I will definitely want to read that book. So I'll be reading for that to come out. Yeah, that sounds right up my alley. So, and like we talked about before, I had a similar kind of experience, but didn't listen and went anyways. And I don't know how many times I probably got the message of you're on the wrong path, and I ignored. So yeah, anyways, that's really interesting. What kind of dog do you have? Just curious, because I love dogs.
It's a lab. She's not quite a year old, and she's crazy. But she's learning to settle down, so we're getting there.
That's wonderful. So I wasn't going to go here, but I guess I am just too curious. What is your Enneagram number? Are you a 3?
Okay, you got to refresh me. I think I am a 3. Tell me is it maximizer?
It's the achiever, yeah. So I would assume that's what I have. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I'm like a 3, and then 8 is the next one.
Oh, yeah. So 8 is the challenger.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. We don't have to dive too deep into that, but because we had that previous conversation and the podcast before yours, we talk a lot about Enneagram, but the achiever, I can see that. I could totally see that. That's awesome. So I guess, like, just kind of to recap, some of the recipes for success for you, again, included having a great mentor, having a long-term vision to the point of you wrote 2 business plans for 2 different scenarios, which I love because I come across a lot of people that don't have any business plan whatsoever. And I'm a planner and I'm strategic and I like to do research. And so I feel like it's just a necessity, and it's nice to even go back to it every once in a while, even if you laugh. Like I had to go back to some of my earliest contracts, my earliest invoices, my earliest work not too long ago, and I was just kind of like, oh, this is embarrassing.
I get that.
But like you said, it shows the growth and the change and the evolution, and the fact that I had the ability and kind of the guts to do that, I think is definitely a positive. So being strategic, having a long-term vision, having a mentor. What am I forgetting? Anything else you would throw into that recipe?
Well, I think with that, the strategic is huge. Like the revisiting things frequently. I think for me, I'm a morning person where like I'm freshest in the morning. So I journal and I write down my plans. Like probably if someone picked up some of my notebooks, they would think like I'm obsessed. But it helps me figure out, like, is this really what I want? Is this really where I'm headed? And I think the most successful people I know are people who are just very clear about where they're going, and you don't get that just by like not spending any time, holding things with your heart and your head and trying to figure out, what's it trying to show you and what am I going to need to do to get those results and who do I need to meet and who do I need to hire. And so I think that personal reflection time is just so key.
That reminds me of a quote, John Mark Comer. In the end, your life is no more than the sum of what you gave your attention to. And I feel like you're someone that is really living that. You're giving your attention. It's almost like you're giving your attention to what you're giving your attention to. You're stopping and pausing and checking yourself to make sure that your attention is on the right stuff, the honest stuff, the true stuff, the good stuff. And for you, that's taking care of other people and helping people navigate some of what's probably the most difficult times of their life, whether it be a mental, emotional, or physical hurdle. I think, I definitely.
And trying to help them not look at it like it's all wrong either. And I think that's the gift in all of this is, when you watch people who are really, like, people follow them, right? Like, I think a lot of times we see only the, like, glamorous parts of, like, their success, but most of them have some pretty, yes, exactly. Most of them have such deep, almost like gut-wrenching or heartbreaking stories, too, that have allowed them to kind of crack open to this wide array of how life teaches us. And I think that's the part that the sooner we can see that nothing is really a mistake, and what part do we control ourselves, then we can start to be really empowered in our life, even when we have, pretty massively not unplanned or scary or troubling things that happen where you're like, okay, and what do I want my life to be like? And how can I, like, navigate through this so that it doesn't break me? And, it makes me flexible instead of hard,
Yeah. Yeah, because I do think people look at a mistake and they spend a lot of time beating themselves up for it. And they become their worst enemy in the sense, then they can't kind of move on or experience the growth we've been talking about or the success that we've kind of been talking about. But from you, I'm just hearing from the beginning, you had a conviction and you were convinced that this is what you were going to do.
Once I got humbled. Yes, once I got humbled. And that was where it started to break me open. And that's where I think a lot of us start off at. You have this thing that happens that makes you second guess a lot of things, but in the process of that, it opens you up. And you can, again, I think some people shut down, and it makes them go further down a rabbit hole of not maybe living their most fulfilling version of their life. But at some point, you always have more opportunities to change that.
Yeah.
So,
I tweeted for a client today, the only way out is through. And that's really, it's like, I don't think it was one of my yoga teachers that actually said that, but yeah, that's another quote that just kind of sticks with me, because it's like when something does happen, it's like you've got to get to the other side, you got to go through. And I'm kind of the same way with you, where it's like I take action, and that's why I don't belong in the corporate world, because I can't handle having meetings about what we're going to have a meeting about. I just have to act, right? Yes. So me and the corporate world, we're not friends, but yeah. So I just like to be doing as well, and not even necessarily achieving, but just doing to get through. To get through and to work through is for me really fulfilling. Yeah, so this has been great. Any last thoughts that you want our listeners to know about your journey or any of the things that we talked about?
No, I think it's just, again, like if you're an entrepreneur or you're just starting out, is to remember that you're going to take a leap and there's always going to be the next leap. So this fear of having to have it all organized or know all the answers of how it's going to turn out, that's never going to go away. And so you just have to keep trusting that, like, you line up what you can, and then you take some action and see what falls, So I think that the perfectionistic mode in most of us is our worst enemy at times through creation, because nothing is actually going to be perfect. And in the recognition of that, you are able to move forward,
Yeah, I think get comfortable with being uncomfortable because you never have all the answers. You never have it figured out. You never know if it's going to work necessarily ahead of time.
Right.
That's really, a great point. So tell our listeners, Lona, where they can find you, follow you, read your books.
Yeah, okay. Probably the easiest way to find my stuff, and I have a blog too that I sporadically write on, is just my website. So my name, Lona Cook, LONACOOK.com. And then you can find my social handles on there too. And if you're in Chippewa Falls and you need a chiropractor, you can find me at Cook Chiropractic too.
Good, great. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, Doctor. I really appreciate you, and I think that you're doing wonderful things. I can't wait to hear more, and I really can't wait to read that book.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for letting me do this. This is exciting. I feel like this is, like, for me, the exciting part is now to go to kind of a different audience and talk, like, that isn't all chiropractors. I'm, like, geeked out about that, so.
I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.